This is the Spurscast with your host, Paul Garcia.
And welcome back to another episode of the Spurscast. In today's episode, I'll be joined by Project Spurs writer Collin Reid. In this episode, Collin and I will discuss Victor Wembanyama's play in the last 3 games and Devin Vassell and Jeremy Sohan's seasons coming to an end due to injuries. Let's go and jump right into this episode with Collin. Collin, how have you been?
I've been doing well. It's been such an exciting time in the world of basketball. The men's and women's college tournament has been very entertaining. And, as soon as that ends, it's like a week or two later and we get the playoffs. So, the opening weekend of the playoffs is like my Christmas. It's my favorite time of year with basketball. There's games every day and it's wonderful. So I'm very excited for that time of year. Unfortunately, we won't be talking about the Spurs in that, but it's a great time of year for a basketball fan.
Yeah, and just 2 comments there. One is like the tournament. I mean, obviously, it's just been really. You're right. Both tournaments. Especially like I watch every Caitlin Clark game, and then also when I had Ben on 2 weeks ago, just to kind of before the tournament started, I want to just know about some of the draft prospects. Man, right away, I was like, if the Spurs get that Toronto pick, Dalton Connect, they need to pick up. They need to draft him. So right away, quickly like this, aiming for the Spurs to get Connect. And then also regarding the Spurs, I think what's really interesting about the way they're ending this season is, yes, we know they're not going to be a playoff team, but man, they are must-watch basketball right now because of Wemby. Just the way, I mean, you would never think a team that's last in the Western Conference, about to be a bottom 3 team by record, and even possibly get the worst record in franchise history. They're actually really entertaining to watch, really fun to watch. They're really competitive in these games, even when there's 2 or 3 players are out from the rotation due to injury. So I think just having Wemby and you don't know what he's going to do each night is what's really made this more just a lot more competitive for San Antonio. But let's go and begin with Wemby actually and the Spurs and how they've done in their last 3 games since I last recorded a Spurscast episode. So let's go back to last Friday. The Spurs are at home hosting the New York Knicks. They win this game in overtime by 4 points. The Spurs led early by 21 points. Then the Knicks came back. Jalen Brunson went off for a career-high 61 points against San Antonio. But Wemby also had himself a career-high night in points with 40 points, a new career-high for Wemby. And then he also tied his career-high in rebounds with 20 rebounds, along with 7 assists to 4 turnovers, and then 2 steals and 1 block. Then 2 nights later, the Spurs are still in San Antonio. They're hosting the Golden State Warriors for the final time this season. They end up losing a close game by 4 points, but that's actually remarkable considering that the Spurs were without Devin Vassell. They were without Jeremy Sohan and also Keldon Johnson due to injuries. The Spurs led in the first half. The Warriors, took the lead in the second half, and then they ended up winning by 4. Wemby again had a good night here: 32 points, 9 rebounds, 5 assists to 5 turnovers, 4 steals and 3 blocks. And then the most recent game was Wemby versus Jokic. The Spurs, a 15.5-point underdog without Devin Vassell, without Jeremy Sohan, without Keldon Johnson, put up a big fight in Denver on the road where they barely lose by 5 points. Nikola Jokic had a good game there with 42 points. And then the Spurs even lost to Cedi Osman due to injury in this game where he had to leave in the first half with an ankle sprain. But Wemby had another kind of night here: 23 points, 15 rebounds, 8 assists to just 2 turnovers. Really good night passing the ball. 1 steal, and then also 9 blocks, with 4 of those blocks on Jokic alone. Just an incredible run by Wemby right now, and the Spurs, considering that they're down a bunch of players due to injuries, and they're still in these fights every night and having a chance to win. What have been your thoughts on Wemby and the team lately?
Yeah, I mean, they look like a completely different team than they did in the beginning of the year. I think that the way that their year started was for a handful of reasons. I think, this is the very beginning of Wemby's career. You're not really going to get a whole lot of flexibility as he gets better and better. So the idea of experimenting with different things made way more sense at the beginning of his career. But I think one thing that maybe a lot of Spurs fans miss is the average level of competency in the NBA this year is higher than I've ever seen it. The average team is much better than they are almost every year. So this isn't like, I think the Spurs have been bad this season, but I think part of what makes them look worse is that nearly every team except for like the bottom 8 or whatever are very good this season. But these past 3 games, I mentioned on Twitter, it's just when their offense is working, you see just how fast they're moving. They're getting down the court quick. Wemby's getting quick seals in the paint, and then he's turning around and scoring over his defender. Or, there's just a very quick action. They're playing with a pace now that there is some level of familiarity, and they can do that. Earlier in the season, you saw a lot of, I don't want to step on your toes. Well, I'm going to stand over here and I don't want to step on your toes. And now that there's that level of familiarity, like things are going quick. They're running a lot. And even when they get into half court situations, they're making quick passes and quick movements just because of the familiarity alone. But kind of what you alluded to there, I think we've seen like 3 or 4 jumps from Wemby just this season. I was like, oh, he's going to come out of the gate super strong, and then he's never played a season as long as the NBA, so he's going to kind of fade, but the next year he's going to be good. And that hasn't been it at all. And that's part of the reason why I think that there's a whole bunch of different paths the Spurs can take for team building. But if the Spurs were like, hey, we want to keep the same exact team and try to get Cooper Flag next year, just with the improvements to Wemby, I don't think like they might still be a lottery team if they keep this team, but he's going to make them too good to compete for a high draft pick. Like the window for good draft picks is maybe over just because he is that good.
And he wants to play. He's not going to let you sit him. Like he needs to really be injured if he's going to sit. Like he's a very competitive player. You would think at this point, young players you would call it a season, knowing that they're not going to make the playoffs. But no, he wants to be out there. And like you said, he didn't really hit that rookie wall. He's actually gotten better as the months have gone on. I mean, the numbers he's putting up. Just for March Player of the Month, I was looking. I know he won Rookie of the Month, but I was like, man, he can actually possibly be like a Western Conference Player of the Month kind of candidate here. Even though he didn't make the nominees, but still the kind of numbers that he's putting up with some of the efficiency. So I had 2 comments there. One basically based on what you said there. So one was about what you said about how much more better the whole league is as a whole. And so if you're one of those bottom teams, it's really tough to get wins this season because Bobby Marks recently had a tweet where like not only San Antonio but like Charlotte, Washington, a bunch of teams, 3 to 5 teams might set like franchise lows and wins. And again, when you look at the Spurs, they're not even going to match some of the numbers that they had from last year. Like I tracked the double-digit deficits and all this kind of stuff. They're not even playing as bad as last year's team, yet they're going to finish most likely with fewer wins. And that just shows you just how much the floor of the whole league has just risen. And if you're one of those bottom teams, I mean, it's been hard to get some wins on the board. So I think that's something that was an interesting comment that you made there, just about how much better the entire league has gotten. And yeah, just like kind of what you mentioned there about Wemby. I mean, one of the most interesting things for me is just reading the opposing players' quotes. That's kind of the first thing I do now when I get the quotes or go back and watch some video. Is as soon as a game's over, I really want to see what the opponents have to say. I kind of know what the Spurs players are going to say and the coaches, but I really want to see what different players are going to say, and even opposing coaches. I think that's what's been really one of the key things that I've seen. I mean, just learning from what Kyrie said recently about Wemby, about how he has like the almost like the what do you say like almost like the instincts of a guard. Like he kind of knows how a guard plays, and that's why he's able to get blocks on different players. Jokic also had a very interesting quote just the other night where Jokic basically said that he thinks all it takes is 2 matchups Wemby has to play you and he's figured you out. Like that's insane. Like Jokic, an MVP, multiple time MVP, probably going to win it this year again, is saying all it takes is Wemby 2 games and he's got you figured out. That is wild, and this kid's only 20 years old. So yeah, man, it's been really wild, just the ride that Wemby's been on, and it's just kind of what he's doing out here. And now that he's qualified for the awards, which we're going to talk about in a little bit, who knows where he's going to be. I think it's going to be really hard to say no to him on some of these award ballots.
Well, and the thing that was really cool about the Jokic matchup was there was one time where they were kind of coming in, it was early offense or transition, and Wemby was kind of soaring in for the block behind him. And Jokic, I mean, he doesn't even turn around. He was going to go up, but he just feels Wemby. He like turns it around into like a reverse layup and makes it. And then a couple times down the floor, Wemby comes and blocks him. It's like this back and forth chess match of like 2 very brilliant basketball minds just adjusting to each other. And like it's just so much fun to watch that kind of matchup. And it's going to be so much fun to see those 2 when both of them are at their primes.
And the fact that, like Pop said, Wemby wants that matchup. Like he wants to guard Jokic. He wants to learn. Jokic might put up 42 points, put up a triple double, but Wemby wants that matchup. And you just see how he's learned more. Just the fact that he got those 4 blocks on him in this most recent game. So moving on here, let's just talk about a little bit about kind of just Devin Vassell and Jeremy Sohan's seasons coming to an end, unfortunately, due to injuries. Sohan did have to have surgery on his ankle, and that was a successful surgery, according to I think it was like an Instagram post that he put out or a tweet or something like that I had seen on social media. And then Vassell's was more so just sitting him down due to an injury as well, but not anything that he needed surgery for. So what I've done here is I sent you just kind of a spreadsheet with just their stats from this season compared to last season where they finished. Let's first talk about Vassell. Just some notes that I highlighted for him from his comps from this year to last year is just his health overall was better this year. I mean, he was able to play. in 30 more games this season from 38 a year ago to 68 this year. And now we know part of that too last year was, yes, he was injured, but then also like, they were trying to like not purposely not win games here, trying to get Wemby. This year, no, they were trying to have him out there as often as possible. I saw a big jump in his field goal percentage. He shot 47% this year. That's a 3% increase. And considering that he doesn't just shoot threes, he shoots in the mid range. He shoots it from the inside as well. I also saw his aggressiveness a little bit more this year with 3 free throw attempts per game. That was a little bit of an increase. And then also his ball movement assist, finding his teammates. We also saw that he was doing this kind of he was having this kind of efficiency while seeing a little bit less usage, because we know that Wemby got added to the team and he's going to take, he's the number one focal point of the offense. So Vassell is now the number 2 player there in terms of running the show at different times. And so we did see that he's able to be this efficient while, having a little bit less usage there. And then just some other notes that I noted when I looked at his shot chart was just more. We did see, especially that time in February, where he really got a little bit more aggressive of attacking in the paint, really trying to, if his 3 ball's not falling, if teams are letting him have jump shots, he was good about trying to get to the free throw line and being physical and try to get inside. And then what I just noted here was just when I show his shot chart later on in this video, he was just efficient almost everywhere on the floor. Just, you couldn't really find an area that was the weakness. He was just a 3-dimensional player who could score from any angle there on the floor. What were your thoughts on the progression that Vassell made this season?
Yeah, I think a lot of it, like what you said, the aggression, I think this was something that we had talked about for the previous 2 years. And if you look at his free throw attempts, I think there's still room for growth just in terms of attacking the rim. But, really looking at how his 3-point percentage is down 1.5%, but his field goal percentage overall is up by 3.3%, which is significant. That tells me that whether it's getting to a spot in the mid range and like taking that shot with like certainty or getting to the rim, not only is he, like you said, more aggressive in those instances, but he's actually making them, which means a lot. I know that a lot of people talk about the mid range being dead, but I think that there's a lot of value in a player who can create that shot on their own and be willing to take it, but also make it. And the fact that he's turning into that guy is very important for this team. But yeah, and he has become more willing to attack the rim. And I feel like that's, I'm pretty happy with his 3-point shooting and his mid-range shooting. And if the attacking the rim just continues to go up and improve and all that stuff, then you have a dangerous scorer who's going to play off, Wemby for a long, long time. And the more attention that Wemby takes, the better Vassell is going to look.
Man, I'll tell you, one of the things that he finished with is he shot over 50% on those floater range shots, those non-restricted area shots, and that's a very tough shot, low efficient shot. Normally, the fact that he shot over 50% there, and then when we think about when he takes those shots, he doesn't just do it on purpose. Like he usually has to do it like at the end of a possession, where like a guy he's fading backwards, taking that shot, and then a defender's hands always in the air, and he's always making it most of the time. So again, that was really impressive to me. The fact that on one of the most difficult shots in the NBA, he actually shot a good percentage here in this past season. All right, now let's jump over to Jeremy Sohan. So, he ends up playing 18 more games this season as well, from compared to his rookie season when he first started last year. We know that, in the beginning it was tough for him because in those first 20 games they threw him in as the point guard there, and that was a tough role for him. But then as he went back to being the power forward, he kind of adjusted there, and he's been really good for the Spurs, especially on the defensive end, where he's been that versatile defender who gets the opposing team's best player out there that he guards every night, whether it's a guard, whether it's a wing, whether it's sometimes a power forward kind of player. So that's usually Sohan's matchup there. So some areas where I noted that we saw some big strengths from him is, yes, he's still he's not he's not an efficient shooter from 3, but he actually he raised his percentage. I mean, last year as a rookie, he shot just 25% from 3. This year he went 6% above to 31%. And there was some points at the season where he was kind of at that 33% for a little bit there. And then of course we know that it kind of fell there. And then also he wasn't scared of the 3. His volume went up a little bit more as well. Last year he was at 2.4 attempts. He went up to 3.1 attempts. He had a little bit of an increase in rebounds to 6.4 per game this year, considering that he was flanked by a guy who's 7'6", collecting boards as well at the same time. And then just ball movement. I mean, yes, it was tough for him to be that point guard, but I think it also taught him more guard level skills, and he's now able to attack when he sees an opening. If he needs to run a pick and roll, he will do it, and that kind of just gave him, I think, a little bit more confidence in his ball handling now that he doesn't have to be the sole player kind of creating the offense for the team. I think that's one benefit for him, and I think he's just done a really good job of kind of finding his spots at different times, especially out in transition. Teammates really find him when he's making those cuts before the defense really gets set. Obviously, we know that in the half court, teams do leave him wide open. Some teams made it very obvious, and that's going to be something that he needs to continue to progress on. Is his 3-point shot? It's not ready just yet. And so again, he's got to make the defenders respect him. And so that'll be something that he needs to work on as the seasons progress or the next few years progress. And just something I want to note was just, again, I think his improvement in three, yes, he's not an efficient shooter, but you've seen big gains here. His arc three is almost the same, 30% last year, now 31%. Look at his corner three, though. Last year, he shot 14% on corner threes. This year, 32%. So that's a big difference right there. And again, that's a shot that they're leaving him open for. And then even his wide open three-pointers, last year he shot 25%. This year he shot 32%. So 7% gain there. And of course, we know that defenses do leave him open. 79% of his threes are taken wide open. And that will be still one of the areas that he needs to improve on. What have been your thoughts on Jeremy Sohan's second season?
Yeah, so I think obviously it's been a pretty up and down season for him with how it started and such. But actually, now that his season is over and we're able to look at it in retrospect, they have Wemby guarding the paint and sealing off the rim. And especially as the year went on, as he got better and better, Sohan was really like, he would guard 1 through 4, the best player in that situation. And what I think is maybe interesting, you talked about how the point guard experiment meant maybe it didn't mean that he was going to be the long-term point guard, but now he can read things better. Part of me also wonders how that affected his ability to defend point guards, getting in the mind of a point guard, trying to figure out, because, he was guarding Jalen Brunson some before he went down. And I don't think it's any coincidence that after he went down, that's when the explosion really started, so the fact is he can guard 1 through 4 on the court, especially if it's not two bigs out there. And I do wonder how much having to play point guard has given him the intuition of like, okay, well, they want to move here in this situation and over here in this situation. I think, the 3-point shooting, when I watch him shoot, the form and the speed, don't inspire confidence that he's going to be like a knockdown movement shooter. But I think the willingness to take it and the ability to make it at even a reasonable level from the corners makes it worthwhile when you have like Wemby and Vassell who can create their own offense and they can create highly efficient offense. And now you have someone who, if they're left open, you'll pass it out to them. That player will shoot and they'll make it enough to punish the other team. So even though it's not like some huge revelation of shooting, I do think that it's valuable in the sense that he's willing to take it. I think, teams leave him so open, and if he were to start hesitating and passing it up, then that would become a big problem for the Spurs offense. But as long as he's willing to take them and he stays above this 30% watermark, I think that that's valuable for the offense, even if it's not like a 40% knockdown movement shooter.
Yeah, even like one of those games where he, I forgot one of the recent wins where he was like, he hit like basically like the game winning three where like he hadn't made any all night. He was like 1 of 6 or something like that. He ends up taking one, and just he kind of has like that confidence at all times, whether or not even though we know that he struggles from 3, he always has that confidence in himself. And so again, I think that's something that he's going to definitely continue to work on in the offseason. And again, he knows that players are you see that right there in the data, 79% of his threes are shot wide open. So that's definitely going to be one of his go-tos that he needs to continue to work on. And for me, it'll be interesting about what they do regarding the draft and also free agency or trades wise in the offseason in terms of, are they going to try to go after another big, whether that's a player who plays the 5 or the 4? Because if that happens, then I think that that's where it makes it a little bit more challenging for Sohan, is if they add another 4 or 5 who's a starter level kind of player, that makes it difficult, because then he would have to switch over to the 3. On defense he'd be fine, but it's more so on offense, then it becomes a little bit more tricky. So again, I'm really interested to see how they construct the roster as well for next season. So again, that's kind of just some feedback on, or some commentary on how Devin and Jeremy's seasons have gone. Again, they did have to end the season a little early here due to injuries. And so now just have some more open-ended questions here before we wrap up this episode, Collin. I did an episode, I don't know if it was last week or the week before, just kind of, I looked at a bunch of defensive players and their numbers and stuff, and I convinced myself, again, eye test and numbers wise, I was like, there's no way Wemby gets left off one of the all defensive teams. I don't know how the media are going to say no to him on this, on at least being on whether it's second team or first team. I think he's got to be one of those 10 players on the all defensive team, especially since it's positionless this coming award season. So that's my first question to you is, how confident are you that Wemby's going to make one of these all defensive teams?
I think not only does he deserve it, but I think as a award that's voted on by the media, you and I also like to consume basketball media, and you can start to see the shifts in how opinions work. And I think that the shifts have happened significantly enough that he's at least going to make the second team. I think even the stingiest person with Wemby's defense has him on the second team, but there are a lot of people who even have him higher than that. So I would be shocked if he didn't make one of the two all defensive teams.
Yes, and then like I said, just a few weeks ago, you had Kyrie Irving coming out and basically saying he should be a candidate for or nominee for the Defensive Player of the Year. Just saying, how he's putting up better numbers than some of the past winners. And then just was it yesterday or the day before? Draymond Green said, a former Defensive Player of the Year winner said, he's convinced as a player who goes against Wemby multiple times this season, he's already convinced Wemby's the best defensive player in the NBA right now, and he deserves that award. So you're also seeing the players now coming out and saying it just openly that Wemby deserves some of these accolades defensively. So I agree with you. I think that it's going to be hard for a media member to say no, whether it's second team or first team. I think that he's going to be on at least one of those two defensive teams. And then now Defensive Player of the Year, I didn't know exactly where he would finish here, but I don't think he's going to win it. Of course, I think it'll still be Gobert. He's the favorite, but I wouldn't be surprised now at this point if he finishes second or third. I think that it would be more shocking to me if he doesn't finish in the top three. What are your thoughts on the Defensive Player of the Year chances for Wemby?
Yeah, I think again you talk about like the media inertia and like Kyrie saying what he said, and then Draymond coming out later and saying what he said. You see the inertia there too. I think he's going to win this award plenty of times throughout his career. By the end of his career, it's going to be the Victor Wembanyama Memorial Award. Part of me does kind of wonder if this is a year where, because the Spurs as a whole have kind of been so rough on defense, we can get some recognitions for some of these other players, your Herb Joneses, who might not have as big of an impact in the future, where they can at least be mentioned, even if Rudy Gobert is going to win it. And then Wemby's going to win it, a billion times after this or something. I will say one of the things that has always bothered me about, the Spurs defensive rating is bad. If you look at over the past, at least half the season, and probably all season, but especially the last half of the season, the on-off splits when he's on versus when he's off are so wild. So when people are saying the Spurs have been bad on defense, what they're really saying is the Spurs are bad on defense when he's not on the floor. And why is that a criteria at all for Defensive Player of the Year? It shouldn't be when he's on the bench, the Spurs are bad, so he's not going to get Defensive Player of the Year. I think things have been moving in that direction, just with some of the players coming out and saying it. And so it'll just be interesting to see kind of how the media goes on this one. That one I have a much harder time reading, like the sense in the room, but I wouldn't be surprised if he was the third, but I also wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't make the top three.
Okay. Yeah. And I think that one, just the kind of the level of attention he's getting right now, and then just his clips are every night, you see players running away from him, not taking layups, not going after dunks because of just his vicinity. I think that's one where, I think even though, yes, the Spurs are, a bottom 10 defense, I think that's one where you can kind of look away from that ranking and not blame that on him. And instead just look at what he's doing out there on the floor and also use the eye test. Again, that's why I think that it's really difficult for the media to say no to whether it's first or second team for Wemby. And then, we'll see again if he cracks the top three there in terms of being a finalist for the Defensive Player of the Year award. Okay, so I wasn't going to go here, but I think it's good just because we started talking about this. I guess I'll go ahead and go here. I don't think he's going to make the one of the All NBA teams. There's 15 players who can be selected for this award. I put all his numbers together, and he's kind of there in the middle. And again, the thing that hurts him is that he only has when he's out on the floor, the Spurs have only won 16 games this year. And there's still stats wise, it's kind of a little bit harder to argue there. On this one, rebounds he sticks out, blocks, steals, of course, just using some base stats here. But again, it's a little bit tougher here that I see him making one of the all NBA teams. But again, I think that I think he's going to get some votes there. I don't think he'll be one of the players who gets there, but I think we are going to see him get some votes for all NBA. What are your thoughts there?
So I do think if he were to sneak in this season, I do think that would be a direct result of the CBA turning this into a positionless game, or a positionless award. I think, and Joel Embiid doesn't meet the minutes requirement, and there's several other centers that don't meet the minutes requirement. But you're looking at Jokic and Rudy. You're not going to give the Defensive Player of the Year a lower spot on the All NBA than the guy who didn't win. So Jokic and Rudy right there, that leaves one other spot. Who else is he competing with? But because it's positionless, if he wins, I think that's how he sneaks on, is just this idea of it shifted from only having 3 centers to now he could be one of 15. I think This sounds like such a cop-out answer, but I genuinely believe it really is going to be fairly close. I think that he's going to get a lot of votes, a lot of all defense or all NBA votes, and whether or not he makes it is going to be kind of on a razor's edge. It's really going to depend on, again, what the media is valuing. Back when I started really focusing on this stuff, there was a lot of old media that really they watched their markets and they would hear about other players. The stuff like what Kyrie says would really influence that because they really only get to see their own market. And now you have people like Zach Lowe and JJ Redick and these types of people. And I think more and more of the voting populace are that kind of, I'm going to dig in, I'm going to watch every player, I'm going to dig into every single stat.
Yeah.
And I think that might go against Wemby just in this 1 year where the Spurs aren't playing as well. But I'm not sure how the media is split up in that regard, but I think he's going to get a good handful of votes. And he'll be either one of the last ones in or one of the last cuts, if you will.
Okay. And man, okay. So because I actually just wrote down some names here because I'll put on the video portion. I'll show you some of the players that I put here that are probably candidates for the All-NBA teams. And man, there is one spot that it's hard to figure out who the player would go there. So you mind if I just read you my names of who I put? Okay. So first I had put Luka, Giannis, Jokic, Shea, and Tatum. So that's the easy five, the starting five or the first five. And then the second one I put Ant, Jalen Brunson. Here I had a little bit of trouble, figure out who goes here. So I put Kevin Durant, Kawhi Leonard, and Devin Booker. And then for the third team is where I think that, again, like you said, maybe he slips and who knows. So again, there's a who knows factor here. I got LeBron here, Zion Williamson, Stephen Curry, Bam Adebayo. And then there's that 14th spot, and there's multiple candidates here. You could say Paul George. You could say maybe Tyrese Halliburton. You could say Anthony Davis. You could say Victor Wembanyama. Again, I think that spot 14 and 15. There's a little bit of leeway here where I think that there's a little bit of a chance there. Who knows how voters go with this, and maybe they look at him. So again, this just kind of just putting a roster together. On my end in terms of just looking at some names here.
Yeah, and sorry if I missed it. Did you mention Jaylen Brown in that list as well?
No. Okay. So he's also on that bubble, where I think that he could be on the third team. Yeah.
Especially with how he continued the year after the All-Star break and the fact that the Celtics are so high and away. When you were talking about how competent the NBA as a whole is, one of the things that I look at is it might have changed by now, but it was just like last week I checked, and the Celtics were 11 games ahead of the second seed. And last night they clinched the best record in the NBA, and there's still 2 weeks to play, so their record is kind of so far above everyone else's, and there's no other team that's really separated themselves from the wins pack like that. And I do wonder if that's going to sway people to give them a second option, especially when Jaylen Brown has been so good since the All-Star break.
Yeah, no, I definitely consider he's definitely on the list here. I just think that I also wonder too, how are voters going to do it? Players teams that have two players, like you said, Brown and Tatum, Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, LeBron James, Anthony Davis. I do wonder if they're going to do a pick one player, or they're going to go with two players onto some of these lists. So we'll kind of see how that goes there. Mm-hmm. All right. So thank you to Collin for joining me here on this episode of the Spurscast. If you like what you heard, please subscribe, rate, and review on YouTube and your favorite podcast apps. This episode was written, recorded, and produced by Paul Garcia. From all of us at Project Spurs, stay safe and have a great day.